Looking at the pictures and just looking at it, it's pretty aggressive common rust.
Just be mindful of how much potassium you're pulling off, and make sure you're charging enough for your straw so that you can put it back.
So we've got soybeans that range from R3 to being planted currently.
This crop went south in a hurry.
We really didn't get the rain with it, just some of the wind.
Welcome to the MFA Made for Agriculture podcast. Here are your hosts, Adam Jones and Cameron Horine.
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones.
And I'm Cameron Horine.
Yeah, and today we've got a really cool episode, or actually what we kind of wanted to start with a series of episodes. We've got some great agronomists on staff, and we've got the ability here to provide some really timely, great information to our trade territory about kind of what's going on in the countryside, what folks are seeing all over all parts of our trade territory, from North Missouri to Southeast Kansas to the Boot Heel. And we've got the right folks on the horn this morning, and I'm going to let them go around the room and introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of get right into it. Our thought process here is to try to keep a nice, short, and sweet episode, just covering timely topics and crop conditions and things like that. So we hopefully we'll keep it short and sweet and get you some great information in the meantime. So let's start with introductions. Shannon, go ahead go first.
Yeah, so Shannon McClintock. Staff agronomist, retail South and West Central. So I'm down in the Southeast Kansas South. Been a staff agronomist here for 4 years now, and started as a crop consultant about 8 years ago.
Okay, great. Thanks for jumping on here this morning. Kevin, I'm looking at you next.
Okay, Kevin Moore. I'm senior staff agronomist for our retail North region, which would be Northern Missouri and Southern Iowa. I've been with the company for 8 years now.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Jesse, you're next on my list.
Yeah, I'm Jesse Surface, Southeast Missouri, Northeast Arkansas. I'm the district agronomist. I've been with MFA for 10 years.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. And Scott, you want to give us an introduction real quick?
Sure. I'm Scott Wilburn. I cover the central region, basically St. Louis to Kansas City, and been with MFA for about 25 years.
All right. Great. Sounds good. Well, thanks to all four of you for jumping on here this morning. I think we're going to kind of go crop by crop and have you guys kind of give us some updates from your geographies about what's going on out there. So looking at this corn crop, we've got a lot of corn that looks like is going to tassel within the next couple weeks. Obviously, there's some weather impacts out there. What are you guys seeing from your geographies?
Well, in the north, yeah, we're about, well, we've actually got some fields that are just starting to tassel. I'd say next week we'll see a lot more. It was getting really dry, and yesterday we did get a much needed rain, but as with summer storms, there was some violent winds that did lay a lot of fields over. Sometimes we get green snap. Sometimes the corn lays over if the ground's wet enough, lays over from the base. Fortunately, I have not had a lot of reports of green snap, but there are a lot of fields that are leaning over, laying flat, which has caused a lot of concerns. But I guess my biggest advice on a situation like that is we just have to give it a few days and let that corn recover. Let it stand back upright. We'll typically have some goosenecking, but which that may cause some difficulties at harvest. But oftentimes we can, that corn will stand back up enough to where we can still have successful pollination and still have that yield potential there. We just need to give it a few days to see what it looks like and how it recovers.
Yeah, gotcha. That's good stuff, Kevin.
Retail South. Our corn's tasseled and is pollinating right now. We've got planes lined up last week, and there's been fungicide and Trin B starting to go on this week. With it being hot and dry this week, there's been some guys maybe thinking about backing out, but looking at the future forecast, we've got a lot of potential for rain again next week. I think every day next week has some sort of moisture in the forecast. We're in a quite a bit different scenario than we were this time last year. This time last year, we were seeing a lot of what you guys are seeing up north. Thankfully, we have a good crop. so far. Things are looking really good. Disease pressure is starting to pick up. There was some early reports this week of maybe possible southern rust in the area. Since those reports came out, they've actually been confirmed by MU to be common rust. Looking at the pictures and just looking at it, it's pretty aggressive common rust, which tells me that we have the environment and the canopy for if southern rust does show up to, could become a huge problem and may require that fungicide application. Chest and Stacy, their District 8 consultant, yesterday sent me some pictures that we really think is southern rust. We're going to send some samples off first of next week to confirm or deny that that's what it is. But look at the pictures; it certainly looks like it.
I'm not really sure what the wind did to our crop yet. I was further south most of yesterday. I know there were some branches down when I got back home around Mexico. We really didn't get the rain with it, just some of the wind. I've not had reports. Generally, I get pictures and everything after something like that pretty quick, and have not heard of anything. And I sure didn't see anything, at least driving up from the south. So hopefully we missed that. Yeah, we've got a lot of corn that's just now starting to tassel as well. I guess the main thing I would just say, depending on where you're at in our region, we've got some stuff that looks pretty tough, particularly as you get further south. They're kind of heading in their second year of this in a lot of places. But a lot of the areas I drive up and down really that I-70 corridor, a lot of our crop looks a lot better than we would expect. Overnight lows, with the exception of Wednesday night, Thursday morning, we've cooled off every night. We were forecasted to be hot again last night. And, when I stepped out of the house a little after 5 this morning, it was around 68. So we even cooled off again last night. So that's really helping us. I guess the calls that I've received the last few days, there's been some concern regarding tassels emerging and not seeing a lot of silks. Usually from at least the folks I've talked to so far, upon closer examination or even visiting the field again, a day later, so far that has been resolved. By the time, pollen starts dropping, silks are starting to emerge. They are emerging, I think, quite a bit slower than we're used to seeing, and that makes sense, given the lack of moisture. The only caution I would give because of that, not to raise a huge alarm, but at least to put it on folks' radar. We normally we don't worry a whole lot about silk clipping, Japanese beetles, red-headed flea beetles. I mean, there's a few others that will work on our silks, but usually the silks outpace that. If these silks are emerging slower, and if insects are kind of desperate for finding something to eat, that could create a situation this year that's a little more unique than what we've seen in the past. So again, not to raise an alarm on it, but I would keep an eye on your silks, and if you get a lot of insect pressure on those early, it might be the kind of thing that we need to go in and clean those up to protect pollination. Something we normally don't worry about. We usually throw the insecticide in with the fungicide, and this year it could almost be a reverse situation.
Gotcha. Yeah, Scott, that's good stuff, and good to point out the difference in pollination speed for this year. Jesse, you got anything to add to those guys?
The southern half of the territory, of course, is irrigated, and it all looks really good. Probably one of the better looking years we got. Just being able to have a dry spell while we planted and keep it dry and get the corn up really did a big difference there. We go to the north end. I mean, there's places it's been 6 weeks without rain, and I really don't want to be negative, but this week it really took a whooping. These couple days, 100, 105 that we're having with no rain, this crop went south in a hurry. Not saying if we can't get some rain next week, some good things won't happen, but the 200, 210 bushel corn crop we're used to is not going to happen. We're looking 170, 180 if we're lucky.
Right. Yeah.
The irrigated
No, I think
stuff,
it's
lots of fungicides going out down south. Just because irrigated, nobody's even batting an eye at that. But it's been a struggle to the north.
sure. Yeah. Circling back on the kind of the disease thing, Kevin, you want to have you been seeing any corn disease kind of in the north, or you want to make any comments on that? Because I know that's something that that everybody kind of questions. It seems like when we get a dry year, as far as what's the disease pressure going to be like under these climatic conditions versus what we typically see?
Yes, we have been finding gray leaf spot. We have been finding northern cornleaf blight, which we see those every year anymore, wet or dry. And then there has been reports of tar spot in northern Missouri, confirmed in Holt County on the far west side and Marion County on the far east side. And then with our crop track program, we believe we found some in Adair County this week. Samples have been sent off to confirm that, but so that would be northeast Missouri still, but kind of a little more central. So we do have evidence of tar spot in the north region. With it being dry and this being a new disease that we're still learning a lot about. I guess I don't think it's cause for alarm yet, but it's definitely something we need to keep an eye on. Typically, from the information we have, it does prefer wetter conditions, but we have did finally get some rain recently, so it's certainly something we'll be watching really close to see how that develops.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think, one of the good takeaways there is this is obviously not something that we have to wait for it to come in every year. Now it's something that we clearly have in our system, and we're going to have to manage through as we roll each and every year moving forward.
I think just
Cameron.
real quickly, one thing that I think Scott brought up that was important, just to kind of differentiate, because some people have talked about this being similar to 2012. I think the one thing that's different between 2012 and this year is, like Scott brought up, the nighttime temperatures. I think that's a huge differentiation. I think that's why we've seen the crop looking fairly decent compared to what we would expect at this point so far. So if it continues to be super hot through July and stuff, then maybe that's going to cause more concerns and issues. But the fact that we have cooled off has helped us a lot.
Another difference, of course, this was over 10 years ago now, but if my memory's correct, I think the drought in 2012 might have really started getting severe a little later than this time of year, rather than where we saw dry weather early, in 2023. But I guess you guys we might have to all put our memories together for that one. It's been
my recollection
a few nights since then.
Yeah, my recollection from 2012, and I was having that discussion yesterday, and we can go back in the weather archives and look at some of this, and I'd like to just, it fades, like you said, over 10 years, but I remember, the one that really jumped out to me, I have a neighbor that just takes impeccable care of his yard, and, the sprinkler usually comes out tail end of June, 1st of July, and he was watering about the 20th of May that year. And I remember just thinking as I was in my yard, like, oh boy, here we go. Because it just already kind of had that feeling, at least in the central part of the state. But kind of like you said, Kevin, I really want to go back and look at that. The crop was extremely early too, so that elevated some of that stuff. I mean, we were scouting corn that was up. And we had a lot of corn planted on the 15th of March that year. We had wheat that was jointed on about the 23rd of March. We were scouting corn that was up by the end of March already. So everything was kind of in overdrive that year all the way around.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys pointed out the temperatures being different, but I definitely remember some 110 degree daytime highs kind of in that mid-June time frame from that year. So
well, I'll just say the one that really, it wasn't that, when we stepped out of the house yesterday morning, it was warm. It was already like mid-late morning warm, but it wasn't hot. What I remember from 2000, and this is one of the things I wanted to confirm, whether it was 2012, 13, or both, because they were both, hot and dry. 12's the one that jumps out, but 13 was pretty rough too. The one I recall, stepping out of the house, 2 a.m, to quiet the dog or something like that. And I mean, it was just close and just extremely hot, even in the middle of the night. We just,
right.
We just didn't receive any relief. And when you stepped into beans, that had any kind of canopy at all. I mean, just the heat that was being held down and, even early in the day.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, there's definitely some correlation from the precipitation pattern, but there's some pretty key differences there too. Guys, let's move on to soybeans. What are you all seeing out there? You want to start back with Shannon again and go through?
We're kind of in a unique area with as much wheat as we have. So we've got soybeans that range from R3 to being planted currently. Kind of all over the place in terms of how those early crop beans look. You get up in that west central area, kind of what Scott mentioned earlier, which would be the southern end of his territory, the northern end of mine. We're seeing some drought stress really affecting the growth of the beans. We've got some R3 beans that are, they're just not very tall. They don't have much growth to them. A lot of our early beans get planted in 30-inch rows, and so we're seeing some canopies still open. Not what we're used to seeing when we have R3 beans, but we've also got areas, farther south, kind of south, I would say south of that Rich Hill Highway 54 area, where we've got some beans that look really good. So we're kind of all over the place. Insect pressure has been our main concern, especially in those drier areas with webworms and spider mites being a huge concern. I'm really concerned about webworms becoming an issue in our double crop beans as they start coming up if we stay dry. I've seen it just about every year now. Somewhere we find stands that just gets devastated by webworms. So it's something we're trying to keep an eye on.
Yeah, good stuff. Go ahead, Kevin. What are you seeing up north?
So with soybeans, we are seeing some of our early planted beans, mid-April, mid to late April, that are right at the tail end of R2. We haven't come across any R3 beans yet, but I do expect to see some next week, which is very early to be at that growth stage. We typically, a lot of times we don't see beans even flower till right around the summer solstice, 21st of June, but we started seeing flowers a couple weeks ahead of that this year. Combination of early planting, high temperatures at times, which it does happen in some years. It's not this isn't the first time we've seen it, but it is kind of rare. But we are kind of watching that development. Kind of very interesting to see how fast things are coming along. I will say though that our beans that are far along like that, we are, at least in the 15-inch rows, we are seeing that canopy closed in those situations up north. I would say what I'm talking about is probably a small percentage of the soybeans. Probably the majority of soybeans are probably that early part of R2, right at R1 at this time. But anyways, as far as insects goes, with the dry weather, we have had a lot of spider mite activity, a lot of fields getting sprayed. We've been working on making sure the right insecticide products are getting sprayed for spider mites, as pyrethroids will not kill spider mites. They can actually make the problem worse. So we're making sure we're recommending products that contain either bifenthrin or dimethoate or some different modes of action, such as agromech for those spider mites, to get those under control. And hopefully this rain that came through will kind of help those soybeans that had the damage recover from the spider mite injury and prevent the spider mites from getting worse and spreading as well.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Kevin. Scott?
Yeah, we also, we've got a wide variety of beans out there. I looked at some yesterday that, had not emerged very long ago, and also looked at some R3s. After I went out to I was called to just double check a field. They wanted to kind of confirm it was at R2, and after I got to looking at it closer, I realized it was R3. Talking to people throughout the day, quite a bit of that being found. I guess the thing that I would that triggers fungicides for us. R3 does. Typically, R3 to R5 is when we look at fungicide. I am always adamant, with stores I work with consultants I work with, that being early on fungicide in general is where we usually want to be, and soybeans in particular, being on the very front end of R3, even to the latter stages of R2, is where I would like to be. But I need to amend that a little bit, just with the situation we're seeing this year. Usually we're seeing our beans, I somewhere in about the middle of July is where we usually see R3 beans at the earliest. The vast majority of our late threes that are planted when we usually plant beans here in the last 10 years, when we've really been looking at a lot of fungicide, makes those beans hit around the last week of July at R3. One thing about that, and I wrote about it in an article this week, it goes into a little more detail, but I'll just say, when you get on that backside, going from R3 to R5 can take as little as, just a little more than a week. And I've seen that happen a lot, to where we would pull the trigger on 21st, 22nd of July, perfectly timed front end of R3, and you have a weather event, you have a breakdown, you have a supply issue, you have something, and next thing you know, it's the 1st of August, it's well into R5, and we've missed the window for our best yield. Where we're on the front end of that now, we have the opportunity, and again, I threw a chart in from University of Minnesota. Brian Norton with Syngenta reminded me of that yesterday, and it does a really nice job of showing how, the full range of what you can normally see. And when you get on the other side of that, rather than be, 9 days or so, you can be up around 40 days. So, it's kind of expected that right now we could spend a lot more time. I don't expect the beans. I guess what I'm getting at is the beans we found on the 29th of June. I don't expect them to race through and be R5 by the 10th of July. So our window, where I always really preach to be on the front end of that, I think our window is much wider now. So it gives us the benefit of watching to see what we get, rain wise here in the next week. Keep our powder dry for a little bit, and we still have an opportunity for the benefit over a longer period of time. But if we hold off a little bit, it also allows us to stretch that residual out, so that we're not spraying now and then looking at possibly having to spray for something that shows up later on. From a very practical side, also, we've got a lot of beans that are not canopied. I mean, I've got R3 beans that aren't canopied, that if we would get a rain this weekend or first to next week, it's very likely that they will continue to be sprayed. So it'd be pretty unprecedented to spray with fungicide and then go back out and start spraying for weeds again. So.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Good to point out just kind of the differences from some of the normal soybeans that we've got out there this year. Jesse, you got something that you want to add from the boot heel?
So the northern parts, a lot like Shannon, they're just all over the board. We got guys who aren't even thinking about planting double crop beans until it rains, and they're going to hold out to about the 10th of July, hoping they'll get something. And then, just like the corn this week, has just done a number on them dryland beans. Just, you can tell they're not happy. They hadn't been growing. I mean, we got 15-inch beans that were in the ground for almost 60 days before they reached canopy. And we got some 30 inches that I don't know if they ever will canopy. So it's just a struggle with weed control. Worst year I've ever had just in weed control in general. Just these hot, dry days, and you might get a 10th of rain. So the weeds kind of grow, but they're still stressed at the same time and not taking in herbicides. And it's for lack of a better word, just been a nightmare on that. And then we get into the southern part, the irrigated part. Our early planted beans look really, really good. They're at R3, steadily watering them. And then on the other extreme, we got some beans planted a month ago that pretty well were watered up and been watered ever since to keep them growing, try to get them to canopy, stuff makes them. Insects, we're not seeing a whole lot right now. If we start getting some moisture, and I expect flyburn to start popping up. That's about all I've got right now.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Jesse. So you kind of led us into a transition into kind of those double crop beans, and just real quick, kind of wanted to go around the horn again and kind of get everybody's thoughts on kind of what the wheat was like, and what is that double crop opportunity, I guess. I know there's some of them that got put in the ground before this rain that part of the state got. So hopefully we got enough rain to get those to come up. But any other thoughts out there? I mean, I know there's a hay shortage in the world too, because of drought conditions, and so I think it may be a good opportunity to do something down that road as well in that double crop situation. So, Shannon, you want to talk a little bit about the wheat and what's going on with the double crops?
Yeah, so wheat yield wise has been all over the board. Overall, much better than expected. Which the areas that received timely rains, we got to remember wheat's a dry land crop, and through the early part of its life this season, it was dry. And then it started catching rains about Mother's Day, which is about perfect for grain fill. I've seen some yields that I have never seen before, and I hope I get to see them again. And I've also got parts of my territory to the far west that was drier, just a little bit longer, was in much worse shape after the end of last year. That the yields are, they're not desirable, but we are having a crop, which is good. There was a few guys that had started grazing wheat this fall with the intention of taking a grain, but because of what you mentioned with the forage shortage, they decided to just go ahead and graze it out through the season. There's a little bit more than normal straw getting baled up. I wouldn't say more than normal. It's about as much as we normally see. Maybe it's just different guys that are doing it this year. We started wheat harvest 2.5, almost 3 weeks ago now. So what I consider kind of an early harvest, we actually had some beans in the ground now for a while. We got double crop beans up that are V2, V3, and then we got some that are still going in. With the way the forecast looks, with the chance of rain just about every day next week, I think they're still just going. We're just trying to get done. The guys done. They're trying to get harvest wrapped up, just trying to get beans in the ground as quickly as they can, with the intention of it raining and we getting good stands. There's a few replants that'll have to happen, but that's normal.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Thanks, Shannon. Kevin, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so wheat harvest has been going on for about a week or so, and yields are all over the place. 50 bushel an acre on the low end and up to 110 on the high end, and that those swings are, one being a pretty wide area from east to west. So as you can imagine, there's different weather events hitting at different times through that growing season is a part of it, and then different management practices that growers are implementing on wheat. Some of the guys that are growing wheat year after year and trying to push those yields, that's where we're seeing that on the high end. So we did see some really good yields there. This is a little bit earlier of a wheat harvest than normal, so I do anticipate a lot of double crop beans going in after this wheat harvest wraps up.
Gotcha. Thanks, Kevin. Scott, you want to go next?
Yeah, overall, just kind of the way Shannon was saying in particular, just yields have been much better than expected. Wheat is a dry land crop, but there about a month and a half ago, things were pretty tough. Like I've said, just talking about how this year is, singular in a lot of ways. 20 some odd years of doing this, and I have never told a guy that his wheat really needed rain in the in the spring of the year. Received a phone call, about irrigating, wheat. I've never received that call. So for that, and then as well as when we really started to fill and everything about a month ago, we had a few days where it got really warm, and that concerned me. That can really make us race through stages, and but as far as wheat goes, the weather straightened itself out pretty quick. We cooled off again, and hearing excellent yields and good test weight, good quality. So been a positive overall. A lot of double crops already in the ground. I think Shannon also mentioned a lot of straw being rolled up. I've noticed that as well. I know this is kind of my beat that I always, speak about, it seems like, but just remember how much potassium you're pulling away whenever you start rolling up straw. I saw a field yesterday. They were combining, they were rolling up straw, and right across the road, soybeans had potassium deficiency in them. Understandable, that. I mean, I understand that the weather is also exacerbating that situation, but 20 years of looking at soil tests, it also follows a lot of times the numbers that we have. So when you're pulling all that material off, just be mindful of how much potassium you're pulling off, and make sure you're charging enough for your straw so that you can put it back.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Jesse, you want to add anything? I know you mentioned double crops down there in the kind of in the southeast, but anything else on the wheat double crop soybean front?
Wheat was really good this year, especially for the guys who, like Shannon said, managed it right. Very well, like 20 bushel better than what we ever thought of better. Like, there's no complaints on the wheat front. And then the double crops, a lot of them, more than half. Some guys planted, some guys didn't, but either way, we're still waiting on the rain to get the majority of the double crops up.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of folks across the trade territory that are in that same boat. So thanks, Jesse. All right, guys, I think I'm going to cut us off there, just as we've for time constraints. I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen today. It's hard for us to get everybody together, but I feel like even in this scenario where we've got 3 folks on the road and one before he jumps in his truck and takes off for the day, I think it's great to get this information across. So apologize if there's any feedback or goofy background sounds as all of us are in the field for the day. But I still think it's a good way to get some great information out there, and we'll try to tidy that stuff up next time. But anyway, appreciate you 4 jumping on here this morning, and appreciate everybody jumping on and listening for the day. And we'll be back with another one of these episodes in 2 weeks. So thanks, folks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Made for Agriculture. Email comments and questions to podcast@mfa-inc.com.